Hello folks, today I'll be showing off some new progress that I made on my bird game from the past few weeks. Unfortunately, my day job has been keeping me pretty busy lately, but I do have some new stuff to share. The biggest change is a new enemy type, which I've called the Little Mite, or Little Termite. These enemies are planned to be the gimmick for the third level of the game, and their behavior is pretty simple. Within any level, I can spawn in a nest object, which is just some invisible source that spawns these Little Mite enemies. I can configure this nest with a few properties so it matches whatever scenario I want. This allows me to put nests on walls where the Little Mites fly out horizontally, or I can put nests on the ground or the ceiling and they'll pop out before flying off. I love how this looks, and this flexible configuration allows me a bit more creativity when designing levels. Accomplishing this nest spawning system means that the Little Mites need to be pretty unique from other enemies. For example, regular termite enemies walk along the ground, and they are affected by gravity. If they collide with a wall or a platform object, they'll need to stop. Little Mites can't operate this way because nests are located inside of platforms, and the Little Mites emerge from those platforms. Since this is the case, Little Mite enemies have completely different collision properties compared to regular enemies. They completely ignore walls and platforms, which is how they're able to come out of the ground smoothly. But since these enemies ignore walls, I initially ran into a problem where Little Mites from far later in the level would phase through all of the platforms in their path and eventually reach earlier parts of the stage where they shouldn't belong. This meant that I needed to have some way for these Little Mites to be removed from the game. So I made it so that every nest had a corresponding exit nest. Basically, every Little Mite spawns from its home nest and is flying towards a destination nest. Basically just some extra tiles, and the Little Mite will fly into the wall. At this point though, I need to destroy this enemy and remove it from the game. That's when I introduced the Zapper. This is built into the platform object, so it's no different from any other regular walls or ground that you can walk on or collide with. However, when I designate a wall to be a Zapper, that means that when any enemy collides with it, they'll be instantly destroyed. Pretty much like a real bug zapper. So you'll notice that behind every exit nest, there's a hidden Zapper object that the Little Mites will certainly run into. This is what I use to prevent the Little Mites from traveling into parts of the level where they shouldn't go. And like I mentioned, Zappers will destroy any enemy, and although they currently are only being used to get rid of Little Mites, I'm pretty confident I'll find scenarios later on where I'll need to have other enemies instantly zapped out of existence. With all this in place, I designed the first part of level 3, where it introduces the Little Mites to the player, and they can optionally bounce off of them to gain extra speed. I have to say the Little Mites are pretty challenging to dive onto, which I actually like. That means for any players attempting the time trials, they'll need to practice in order to get the best time possible. Once the first part of the level is completed, I wanted to really shake things up, so I made this challenge room. At the top you can see the timer count down, and you just have to avoid the Little Mites to survive until the timer reaches 0. Believe it or not, this room is pretty challenging. When I first made it, it took me several tries to get through, so this might be changed or balanced a little bit after some player testing. After this room, this level finishes off with a treetop section using some new tiles that I put together. I personally find these parts of the game with pass-through platforms really fun, since you have a lot more mobility and fewer obstacles in your way. There's still parts where you have to avoid or dive onto Little Mites, but I didn't want to overwhelm the player too much, considering that previous challenge room is kind of hard. Overall, that about sums up the bulk of the updates I made to the game. There is more, but those things are only partially done, so I think I'll save them for a later video when they're more presentable. If you enjoyed this devlog, please leave the video a like, I'd greatly appreciate that. And I post game development content like this every single week, so be sure to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks so much for watching to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.